Every day in America, over 1 million police and law enforcement officers bravely serve our communities faithfully, honestly, and with true respect for the people they serve. But when law enforcement officers lose control of their duties, terrible consequences can occur. This is one such story that is sad but true. The following is the incredible but true story of a family's fight against the unrelenting and misguided wrath of law enforcement.
This is the story of James Keith Cooley, a lifelong resident of Wayne County, Mississippi. He is a pharmacist, a well-educated and a peaceful man. He is a man who is always ready to help a friend or neighbor in need. A man whose roots go far back in this community, a community he chose to continue to reside, raise a family in a county where you would be hard-pressed to find anyone who would speak ill about him, with the sole exception of certain law enforcement officers. This documentary will reveal that evidence previously released to the community was one-sided and untrue. You will hear from people who have been by Keith Cooley's side throughout this entire ordeal. You will find that Officer Brent Purcell developed intense hatred towards Keith Cooley and targeted him. Much of what Purcell did was purely for show, with the intent to cast him in a negative light to destroy his reputation in this community. This started before 2010 when there was a burglary at Cooley Pharmacy. It escalated over the years to a tasing of Keith Cooley while behind his own store. After Keith rightfully sued the police department for the physical damage caused by the tasing incident, matters just kept getting worse. There was continued harassment of law enforcement to Keith Cooley, his customers, and subsequently, not one, but 2 more burglaries of Cooley Pharmacy itself. And as if that wouldn't be enough, the fateful day when he and an uninvolved passenger, while unarmed, were repeatedly shot at, leaving them terrified and in fear of their own lives. You have seen media reports about explosions, search warrants, arrests, and shootings. Much of what you have heard is misleading, inaccurate, or downright false. As a resident of Wayne County, you have the right to know what has been going on in your own community. And while the information you are about to receive from eyewitnesses is not the complete story, it is the beginning of the Cooley family's battle for truth.
Okay, he hit us going into the driveway, and then we went down, because you go down a hill and you go back up a hill. And we was down at the bottom of that first hill, and that truck came up beside us and was trying to push us off the driveway because it's an asphalt driveway. And then we went up on top of the hill, the other hill where his house and stuff is all sitting at. And Brent had got behind us then and went around the yard that way, and we came in this way. And he got in front of us and blocked us off and got out and started shooting at us.
Well, it was before the incident that we've been talking about with Brent Purcell and the vehicle. The first burglary of Keith's drugstore was when what my husband was saying about the football hero broke in. Afterwards, WDAM-TV sent a reporter to talk to Keith to ask him about the burglary, and Keith told exactly what happened, that the cops did not come, and they got upset about that. And they didn't want him telling something that would make them look bad. So from that time, there was problems. The cop that came and talked to Keith was the cop that was on duty that night. That he did not come, and I'm not sure who the other one was that was supposed to come with him. But anyway, he told Keith he believed he was behind the robbery. He was angry because Keith made him look bad on television. And it was proven that Keith was not behind the robbery. They caught the man, they found the truck with the guns in Buckatuna, and they proved exactly what happened, that this football hero was the one that had broke in all on his own, and he admitted he had been watching the store and he had been testing the cops to see if they were going to come.
And he broke in and got guns, whatever he could. And they caught him. And his mother called my wife and told her she was so sorry that he did that. But anyway, they wanted to tie Keith in with that. They accused him of being behind it.
Oh.
Okay, they got the boy in jail, and they was harassing him and telling him that if he would be a witness against Keith, they'd let him go. Well, he wouldn't do it. And I admire him for that. But he wouldn't admit that he had anything to do with it. And I think his mother had a lot of influence on him because of how she felt toward Keith.
Right.
And he wouldn't tell them. Said no, he didn't have a thing to do with it. So that's all my doings.
This was a previous break-in, though. This is when all this really got started.
That's what I say.
It was not the break-in a few months ago. The next time there was a robbery, a man hooked his truck to the double steel doors on the back of the drugstore and pulled the doors out of the wall.
My goodness.
And stole guns and other things. They never caught this man, even though Keith had his cameras going, and he said he could see who it is, but they claimed they could not.
Miss Cooley, in the beginning, there was a taser incident. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yes. Keith heard somebody beating on his back door at the drugstore, and he went outside, and there had been an accident. And Mark West, who Keith had words with about the first break-in,
Right.
Was out there. And Keith had told him not to ever come on his property again after he accused Keith of breaking in his own drugstore or having it done. And so Keith told him to leave, and he refused to leave. And there was 2 other cops besides Mark West there. And one of the cops told Mark West to shoot Keith. And Keith didn't know whether, prior to that, let me back up, prior to that, Keith had been told to go back inside the drugstore and let them handle the situation. And so he started walking toward the drugstore, and he heard somebody say, "Shoot him." And so he started running because he didn't know what he was going to be shot with. But anyway, Mark West shot him with the taser.
Ma'am, I didn't get it all. Is it illegal to video these days?
I don't know. He said something, they want to start shocking somebody for it.
Mr. Cooley ran.
Ran for what?
You tell me.
That's how Eric.
I'm going to just make sure nothing happens.
Oh yeah, we got enough cameras there.
All that's on camera.
It's on that camera right there. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I got it too.
Put it on that camera that I'm the one that shot.
I got it, Mark.
And from that, his spine has deteriorated, and he's in bad shape. He got to where he could not stand very long at a time, and a pharmacist has to stand
Right.
due to this back and it was caused from the tasing. It affected the nerves and bones in his lower spine.
So your son, who is a pharmacist and was standing in front of his own business and was tased.
He was behind his business.
Behind his business.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me what that was like?
Well, he had been told to go back into the drugstore, and he was walking when he heard someone say, "Shoot him." Well, he thought he was going to be shot with a regular gun. He didn't know what was going on, so he started running. And he was shot with the taser. And the darts, who have fish hook-like barbs on them, went into his back. And it caused him to fall to the ground in convulsing type action because the pain was so bad, and it was like electricity going through him. And
was he injured besides?
Yes, he was injured. He wound up with a fractured arm, and they put him in a police car, and he still had the barbs in his back. They made him pull them out. He pulled flesh out with them, and he was insisting on going to see a doctor because of both his knee. When he fell on his knee, and it did a lot of damage to his knee, as well as his arm was fractured. He was insisting on going to the doctor, and they put him in leg irons and paraded him around everywhere they went. I mean, he was a respected pharmacist who had never done anything against the law, and this was so degrading to him, and they made it seem like he was some big criminal that they had apprehended, when he really was just a businessman trying to conduct his business. And he had a problem with someone who had said that he believed that Keith had been behind the robbery of his own drugstore, even after it was proved that that was not true. This cop would not relent and apologize. So he has had a lot of bad things happen in his life that he did not deserve. He was only trying to do good.
Did he bring a lawsuit to try to recover some of his damages as a result?
He did. The lawsuit was brought against the police department and certain specific policemen in the department.
Right.
And I believe if he had not brought this lawsuit, none of the things that happened later would have happened, because they were angry with him because he brought the lawsuit, and so they were trying to get him back.
Right. So one more thing. So Keith, again, I want to say this. He was behind his own building.
He was.
And the police decide to tase him because they think he is
because he had told this cop to get off of his property. The same cop that had accused him of breaking in his own business. He had told him previously not to come on his property after he would not back down on the accusation that he made, about him.
Would it have been just as easy to put handcuffs on him if they wanted to take him versus?
It certainly would have. There was no reason for that. A lot of real elaborate things that's been done by the cops involving Keith seems to have been for show. It was not necessary to do what they did. Keith was a law-abiding citizen. He had never done anything to indicate that he was any threat to anybody. Keith was working with the Department of Justice, getting signatures, or not signatures, but getting depositions about things that was going on in Wayne County that should not have gone on.
Right, protecting his hometown.
Right. And he has some depositions that some of the people from the police station was not too happy about. And they started sitting across the street, like he mentioned, from the drugstore. And people would leave the drugstore and they would chase them down, take legitimate medicine away from them.
Oh my God.
And also Keith had to quit taking new customers from Alabama because they were harassing them so bad. I guess they had further to drive, so they could had more time to chase them down. But he had 3 signs in his drugstore that he could no longer take Alabama customers because of the situation that was going on with the cops in Waynesboro.
That is unbelievable.
And he had a lot of Alabama customers. Then the next burglary was this past July, after all of this stuff had really gotten bad, and the cops had torn the cameras up in the drugstore, and I'm not sure who they were, but anyway, they went through the drugstore and just destroyed all the cameras. They blew up his safe. He had a lot of valuable things in the safe. He was also a coin collector, and he was in real estate, and he had papers in the safe that was very valuable, as well as coins and many other things in the safe, and they blew it up.
They being the police, or
the police blew it up. Yes.
What was the reasoning behind that?
And this, I don't know. I guess they used for an excuse that they wanted to see what was in it, because they were trying to say that he was doing something illegal, which he was not. And it was just unreal, the things that they were doing to him to cause him harm. And they destroyed all the cameras, so there was no surveillance. Everybody knew that the drugstore was just, I mean, it had been in the newspaper, a lot of things about this break-in, so it was like advertising to the people, just come on in and take whatever you want. There's nobody here to stop you. And so they did. Somebody broke in. We still don't know who that was. They took a lot of guns and stereo equipment and various other things. We don't even know what all they took, but they took a lot of things that time.
What can you tell us about the day of the incident? It sounds so incredible. It's just hard to believe. Can you tell me what you know?
Yes, ma'am. We were under the impression that Mr. Purcell had been fired from the narcotics force, and he had. We did not know that he had been hired by the city. He showed up at our home in an unmarked vehicle, no uniform, no badge, shooting at my husband. And you know, he could have killed my husband right there in the yard that my children grew up in and played in. And
did Mr. Cooley know from right when he saw the truck that was Officer Purcell?
He did not.
Did you know Officer Purcell?
I did. He and my husband have had an ongoing, not good relationship for many years. And he showed up at our home unannounced, not in uniform, and just started shooting at my husband. And my husband could have very well been killed in the yard that my children were raised in and played in, and it's just.
A little more from the time after they did the U-turn in the road and come back behind you. What happened next?
He was following us, Keith kept telling me, they're following us, something's going on, this guy, something, you know, and I was like, well, maybe it's just a coincidence that
Right.
I had no idea what was going on at the time. And we got closer to Keith's house, and the truck just kept following us. So Keith went to turn in his driveway, and we got rear-ended. We got hit from the side, and we went down Keith's driveway and got to the bottom of the first hill, and we got hit in the behind, right behind in the truck. And then the people, the police, whoever they was, went up like a gully thing and was trying to push us off of the road into some water, and Keith went on and got up ahead of them, and they got behind us, and when we got up in the yard, they went around the yard and cut us off, and like they went around the yard and we pulled up straight like that, and they jumped out and started, I heard pow, 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 and then like it came into focus. As a man sitting there with a gun in front of me shooting at me.
Did Keith have a gun?
No, we did not have a gun, him or me. Neither one had a gun.
What happened next?
Brent ran and jumped back in his truck because he dropped his gun. I guess he ran out of bullets or whatever. He went and jumped back in his, because he shot off a lot of rounds. And he went and jumped back in his truck, and we backed up a little bit to go around him. And Brent pulled forward, started pulling forward when we started to go around him, and we hit the side of the truck.
Trying to stop them from...
I feel like they was trying to stop us from getting to Keith's house. Like, they had it in for him. They had to get him in the yard or whatever.
Did you feel your life was in danger?
Yes, I did. I did. I still feel that way.
So from the time they pulled you out of the car and had you on the ground, what happened from that point on?
I got put in back of the police car, took to the jailhouse, didn't even get booked. They took me straight back to solitary confinement. That's in a cell by yourself. Cannot talk to nobody. I had no communication with the front desk or anybody whatsoever. And
how long were you in solitary
confinement?
For
3 days. For 3 days. I did not talk to anybody for 3 whole days. And nothing for 3 days. Nothing. No shower, nothing. Still in muddy clothes.
What happened after Mr. Cooley was arrested to the home?
Well, some agents came to the home, and they had a bomb squad, which was not necessary. Miss Cooley, which is Keith's mom, was at the scene offering them a key to get in the house. They would not let her open the door. They blew the door up, and they blew his gate up to his entrance, you know, the entrance to his home on his driveway. And they went into the home, destroyed my 2 children's bedrooms. My son had some collectible National Wildlife Turkey Federation pictures, a collectible Dale Earnhardt picture that they destroyed, busted the glass on all of them, and just demolished their rooms and the whole house, really.
Did they give her any reason why they denied the offer of the key to use the key to
They did
enter?
not. They told her she was on the phone with someone when she got there, and they asked her who she was on the phone with, and she told them her lawyer, and they told her to hang the phone up immediately and that she would be arrested if she didn't leave the scene.
Were there any bombs or any explosive devices found on the property?
No, ma'am. There wasn't.
So what reason do you think they had in order to set off an explosive device on the gate and the door?
Just to make themselves look good. You know, just for show. That's just to make it look like it's a really big thing, and Keith had, you know, is just a terrible, terrible person, and that's the only reason they did it, just for show.
After the incident in Mississippi took place and he was arrested, well, he got out, but then Alabama claimed him back because they revoked his bond, and I don't really understand exactly how this came about. but he is incarcerated in Washington County Jail at this time, and we're hoping that that won't be for long. We're hoping he's going to be home soon and be able to help us to fight these charges, because he never intended to do anything wrong. All of this just came about, I believe, because somebody had it in for him.
I am standing in front of Keith's home, where he has lived all his life, where he raised his 2 children, and where he almost lost his life when Officer Purcell continued to shoot into his truck until he was out of bullets. After the shooting, the police, for reasons we do not yet understand, obtained a search warrant to search Keith's home. Rather than let his mother open the locks or hand them the key that she held in her hand, they began the search by setting off an explosive device on the front gate and his front door, with the assistance of the bomb squad from the coast. This is the way that the front door looks now after some of the repairs have taken place. This is the way the door looked after the explosion. Why was Officer Purcell here in the first place? Keith had just been advised that Officer Purcell had been discharged from his duties at the Narcotics Task Force. Unknown to Keith, Purcell was apparently hired by the city police that very afternoon. On any given day, in every city across America, there are hundreds of unserved warrants for misdemeanors. Misdemeanor warrants typically represent a dispute between individuals. Such was this case here. The last person on the face of the earth who needed to serve anything upon Keith Cooley was Brent Purcell, assuming one wishes to be professional. Well, that was the alleged reason that Brent Purcell claimed that he came to Keith's home. Although Officer Purcell claims that he was acting in the capacity of a police officer, he was in a large black truck, tinted windows, no markings to indicate he was an officer. Likewise, he was not in uniform, no badge, and no indication that he had been hired that day by the city police department. Most misdemeanor warrants are served by calling the defendant and having them report to the police department. Officer Purcell chose to approach Keith Cooley's home and engage in a one-sided gun battle. You have heard from Keith's family, his mother and father. You have heard from his wife. You have heard from an innocent bystander that was the passenger in his truck, probably unexpected of Officer Purcell. Now, we are going to let you hear from a smidgen of the people in the community who know Keith Cooley. Although we couldn't put everyone into this one program, we believe that you will get the idea.
Can I speak freely? Okay. By me knowing him all the years that I knew him, his problem didn't start until after the incident at the drugstore, when he decided that he would sue the city of Waynesboro for tasing him with the taser they tased him with, and they called damage to his spine. After that incident, he had problem after problem with law enforcement here in Wayne County. And even got to the point to where different guys that worked for him were used by law enforcement officers to try to set him up. I remember an incident where a guy came around and he said he wanted to borrow a shotgun to go kill a snake. And Mr. Cooley let him have the gun to go kill the snake. But this guy met the former sheriff in Wayne County on the back street and give him the gun, and they tried to charge Mr. Cooley with selling a firearm to a felon. And the way I got this proven was I went to the guy, I knew this guy personally that came and got the gun. And I went to him personally, and he told me the truth about it. He said Mr. Cooley didn't sell him the gun. Said he borrowed the gun, but I guess for some reason he had some charges on him. The guy that borrowed the gun had charges on him by the police department, and he was trying to get them charges dropped. And the only way he could get them charges dropped, he would have to try to frame Mr. Cooley for something that was illegal. And I was at his house after everything went down with the DEA officer, and Miss Cooley was there to let them in, and they refused to cooperate with her. And they took a Hummer with a battering ramp on it and went and tore his gate down. And after they tore his gate down, me and Mr. Cooley, or his father, went back a few days later and we put that gate back up. And after they did that, they went to his house the same day and blew the door off the latches and went in and just destroyed whatever they could destroy. They went in his son's room and tore the closet doors down, took his son's guns that he had been collecting, which shouldn't have had anything to do with Mr. Cooley. They shouldn't have had anything to do with him. They went in his daughter's room, they destroyed property in her room. And before they did all of this, I talked to Mr. Cooley's lawyer when he came up that weekend to check to see what had happened. And he asked me why did they cut the power off before they came in. And I told him the reason they cut the power off because they didn't want nobody to know what was going on the property, because Mr. Cooley had surveillance cameras all over the property. And in order for them to come in and do what they did, they had the power company go out and cut the power off. Now, the way I feel personally, if you coming after me and you coming after me legally, if I've committed a crime, then you should come after me the right way. Don't try to frame me and don't try to set me up. It's what they was doing to him. They did everything they could to bring this man down. And personally, I believe that the day that they chased him by one of the officers in Wayne County, that officer wasn't supposed to be the one to serve papers on Mr. Cooley. Mr. Cooley should have had papers served on him by the sheriff or the guy at the police department, the city police department. Those papers should have been served by him, not by somebody that already done threatened his life. And I believe personally, if the young lady hadn't been in the truck with him the day that they chased him to his home, Mr. Cooley would have been dead. They would have shot him that day, but they couldn't do it because it was a witness in the truck. And I went to Alabama when I followed Miss Cooley over to Alabama to see how Mr. Cooley was doing. And when I got to Alabama, it was 2 officers here from Waynesboro already in Alabama testifying in his bond hearing. And one of the officers that got up and testified did great. He told the truth.
And I have known Keith Cooley since he was a small child. At one time, Keith worked for me. He was going to college, and a couple of summers he worked with me in construction work. We were tying reinforcing steel, and I never saw a boy come out and go to work that learned any faster and done any better job than Keith did. He was always a well-behaved boy. I knew his father for a long, long time, and we were friends. And after Keith got his pharmacy license and started operating a pharmacy, he was our pharmacist. My wife came down with cancer after several years of using him otherwise, and we had to have medicine for her cancer treatments. One prescription of pills was $6,000 for 28 pills, and my wife refused to take them. And Keith begged her to go ahead and take them, said, I'll let you have them at my cost if you'll take them. He was real thoughtful of people. He loved people, and I'll always appreciate him for what he did for us. After Keith was first made a little mistake somewhere and was arrested, it seemed to me like he was just watched continually, and every time he turned the corner seemed like they was on him. And then one day I went to my mailbox and got the Wayne County News out, and when I saw in the Wayne County News that the bomb squad had been called from Gulfport to come up and blow his door off of the hinges, I told my wife that was the most ridiculous thing I had ever heard of. Whatever happened to the old battering ram? They could knock the door open with it and wouldn't cost the taxpayers a lot of money for the bomb squad. But things happen like that, and I think Keith got really feared for his life. And when a man gets scared enough that he's gonna die, he'll do anything to try to get away. And I think Keith was just doing his best to try to get away from those people and keep from getting killed, because he was afraid of his life, and most of us will do that if we get afraid of our life. And I just think Keith is a better guy than that. I don't think he's having a chance, and I would like to see anything they could do for him to give him a chance.
And I've seen people come in the drugstore that didn't have a coin, didn't have nothing to pay for their medicine with, that he would try to help them out whichever way he could. Or they'll come in, they need their light bill paid. he would loan them money to pay their light bill, and some of them paid him back and some of them didn't. And even to this point now, to where he's incarcerated in Alabama, me and his mother try to collect whatever money is owed to him by different ones that owe him money, and some of them that owe him $5,000 and $10,000 pay $5 or $10 a month on a bill. And when he know about this, he still don't complain. Only thing he's concerned about is trying to get out of jail, and I think that's a legitimate complaint, because I've been to Alabama, I looked at the condition as he's in, and they got him in a little cell that you can't even see him. It's not even in the lights in the cell, and it's horrible. I mean, everybody is innocent until proven guilty, I thought, but this man is being incarcerated and being confined in a little old hole with him and one more guy, and you can't even see in the room. The only way you can tell that he's in the cell, he have to walk up there and put his face up against an 8x8 glass, and it don't make sense. And for him not to have friends that will stand behind him and support him, I really can't understand that, because he have been great to everybody here in Wayne County, the blacks, the whites, everybody that ever come before him. He treated everybody equally, and I can't understand why he don't have anybody backing him. And you know, it don't make no sense. But we do need to try to get him out of Alabama as quick as possible. Whether he have to come back to Mississippi and serve time in Mississippi, but we definitely need to get him out of Alabama.
I represent the Alabama part for Mr. Cooley. Keith Cooley, I've been knowing Keith Cooley for 30 years. And Keith is a real good friend of mine. As me and my wife first got married, and a young couple, we met Sadie and Keith Cooley at his new drugstore in Waynesboro, Mississippi, just starting up. And I introduced myself to Keith, and he showed himself as a real good friend of mine, more apt than spiritual, and also he helped me out with my medicine and different medicine for my wife and my family. And Keith always been a good person. All the time we go by, and me and my wife will sit and talk with him and Sadie and just talk and give good conversation. And Keith was a very encouraging man. Keith always been encouraging. He's been a good businessman for as showing and talking about how to do things. Me myself started my business up shortly after Keith and went to the drugstore business. And I got inspiration from Keith from the drugstore business, seeing how he ran his business, how successful he was, and how he treated people. Keith was a very kind person. As they said before, Keith never, for as I'm concerned, he always gave you opportunity to be able to better yourself. Sometimes money wasn't great when I needed to get some medicine or get something. He always gave us credit for his, put something on the account, and we paid, And Keith never did, for as I know, give us a hard time. Me and my wife, we fell in love with Keith and Sadie as good friends, and we always been that way for 30 years. The last I talked with Keith, I know he was going through some problems with the law enforcement agency and different ones, but he always was very encouraging. He wasn't a bitter man towards that. People don't like the way people treat them, but to judge the character of a man, if you let a person change you as a person, that tells your character. Keith did not change from helping people. He always helped. He told me stories about, him loaning money and him helping people and wouldn't pay them back. But Keith never did. They walk in the store, he never did mistreat them. He always treated them well, treated them with respect.
I had a bad problem, was kind of losing my health, had a lot of heart problems, diabetes, was already blind. And I called him one afternoon and said, look, I need my medicines refilled, and he asked me how I was doing. I said, well, Keith, my bathroom's tore up, and I don't know what I'm gonna do now. He said, well, why haven't you already called me? I said, well, do you have a septic service? He said, well, yeah. I said, well, I didn't know that. And he said, I'm sending my men down there, and we're gonna fix all that. And I said, Keith, I don't have the money for that. He said, nobody said anything about money. I said, well, you can't do it for nothing. He said, well, don't worry about that. I'm not gonna let you stay in that house without a restroom because there's no way that you can get out and fix it. Well, I sat there and started crying on the telephone. I said, man, this is unbelievable. He said, no, it's not. He said, I've always been here for you. All you had to do is just ask. And he sent his men down that afternoon. They brought me a bag of groceries, brought my medicine to me, surveyed the damage on my field lines. The next day showed up with their backhoe with nearly 200 feet of field lines, replaced all of that for me, and had my bathroom working again. Keith also told me, if you need anything, you call my pharmacy, tell whoever answers the phone the list of what you need from a grocery store. We will pick it up for you and we will bring it to you. And he said, we know that you can't drive anymore, and the health you're in, it's kind of, and the rest of your family's in, that it's kind of hard to get to town. And so he done a lot of things for me. He helped me with my medicines when I got in my donut hole on my insurance. From October all the way to January, he just more or less furnished my medicine for me with no questions asked. And I mean, you just don't find people like that anymore. And right off the top of my head, I can't think of anybody in Waynesboro that would really do that for anyone. But Keith's a different kind of person that really has a strong conscience and feelings for other people. And I would bend over backwards for Keith. I mean, Keith's a good friend to me, and I'm a good friend to him, and I just know there's no way I can ever pay him back, but Keith's not worried about it. But I think he's getting a raw deal of what's going on with all this law enforcement stuff. It makes you wonder sometimes, how in the heck can they do things like this to people and treat them that way and knowing they're wrong? It's just unbelievable. And I'm hoping that we can get him back up here where all of us are, and maybe get some more help for him with the problems he's got, because it's about time somebody stood up and helped him. I mean, he's helped enough of us, and I'll guarantee you this is just a drop in the bucket right here compared to the people that he's helped in this county.
I've been knowing Keith Cooley just about all of his life, and I run McCrae's Auto Service, and I used to get in a bind, and I'd go talk to Keith, and he'd help me get out of that bind. And there can't be nobody no better than Keith to get somebody out of a bind when you need something. And I did all my drugging with him and my medicine I needed and everything. And my wife did too and everything. And so I got in the bind again, and then he helped me out again. And he said, it don't matter what it is, Charlie, you're such a good friend, I'll help you anytime you need help. And so he really helped me a whole lot. And then I met my second wife here, and then I introduced him to him and his wife Sadie, because I'd been knowing them for years and years. And so me and Judy, we did our drug business with them and everything, and I got in another bind, and here he helped me out again. And I don't know, he didn't have to, but he did it in the kindness of his heart. And so all I can say is ain't nobody no better than Keith Cooley.
And I knew Keith off and on before Charlie and I got married. I was a single parent for a long time, and when, you know, like lots of single moms, I was on welfare. And like when my checks wouldn't come in, you know, he would let me, if my kids were sick, if I was sick, he would give us our medicine until my check come in. You know, because back then things were really hard. And even now, you know, and I cried everything, but anyway, he, you know, when I first became diabetic, and I didn't know nothing about the machines or the strips or anything like that, and he took me over to his counter. He showed me exactly how I needed to do everything. And he has been wonderful to Charlie and me. You know, he, when, like Charlie said, when we got into a bind, he was right there. You know, and I just think that he's getting a raw deal in all this mess, and which we're a typical small town, and people are gonna talk. But I think Keith is innocent through all this, and I think he should come home.
I've known him for a long time, and I think he's a real great guy. and he had helped a whole lot of people here in Wayne County. And if you had all those people here, they could tell you the same thing about Mr. Cooley. He is a fine, honest guy. I have done business with him, and he have helped me out in many ways and helped my family in many ways, and I'm grateful for him. And I'm hoping that maybe that he has a problem, which we all have problems in our life from once upon a time.
My son was 3 years old. He was having like 6 and 9 seizures a day. He was on heavy medication. And I went by Mr. Cooley and I was telling him that my son needed his medication, and which I didn't have the money at the time, but he gave my son the medication. I came back and paid him later for the medication, because evidently if he wouldn't have had the medication, you know, with all the seizures they were having like back to back, he would have died. What pharmacy would give you medication, you know what I'm saying, yes, on your word? Because not a lot of them won't do it, but he did that for me. To me, he saved my son's life, because a child that's having 5 and 6 seizures a day at 3 years old is pretty rough. And I thank God for Mr. Cooley, and I hope and pray that this corruption that's in these surrounding towns, little small towns, I hope it cease, because there's a lot of corruption here and need to cease. Sooner or later, the Justice Department gonna get involved and shut a lot of this corruption down, because there's a lot of corruption going on. Because what been did to Mr. Cooley, it shouldn't have been done.
I had a daughter at 18, and I didn't have the money for medicine, so Keith had got money out of his pocket and gave it to me to pay for the baby medicine. So we started being friends since then, and that's been about 30 years. And so I started working for him off and on, and it's just sad how the people have done Keith. The cops, the lawyers, the judges, all of them have did him really wrong. And it's been like, about 15 people came in one day at the drugstore, and they needed his help, and he did not turn them away at all. And it's just sad the way the people is doing Keith right now. Excuse me. I was driving on 63 going to Clara. I got stopped, supposed to have been stopped for speeding. When he pulled me over, well, he said I was speeding, so he asked, could you search my car? And I said, why do you want to search my car and you stopped me for speeding? And he said, well, ma'am, can I search your car? I said, no, sir, you can't. So he walked around the car to my passenger, my driver's side. He looked in the back seat where my papers were laying, and I guess he saw all of the names on the petition. He opened the back door. He got a few of the papers out, and he said, you a fan of Keith Cooley? I said, I'm a very big fan of his. So he opened the door and got the papers and balled them up and threw them on the ground. And I still didn't get a ticket for speeding, which I wasn't speeding anyway.
What did you do about the papers from that?
I picked them up and put them back in the car.
And then later when you went home?
They got stolen. Sometime that night they got stolen. I don't know when or how or what time or nothing. I just know they wasn't in my car the next day.
We are at the end of this program. And although we are at the end of this program, this is just the beginning of the family's battle for truth. At present, Keith has been convicted of nothing, but he still remains incarcerated, waiting for his day in court. Because of this incarceration, this was the only time that he missed Thanksgiving and Christmas days with his family. You might ask yourself, could this happen to me, my children, my parents, or friends? I'm here to tell you that if it could happen to Keith Cooley, it could absolutely happen to you. Unless everyone is willing to stand up for what is right, it will continue to happen. To all of you who know Keith, love Keith, and look up to Keith, we want you to know that your faith and belief in Keith is not misplaced. We also want you to know that your prayers and support are greatly appreciated, and we appreciate you more than we could ever say. With your continued support and God's will, the truth will come out, justice will prevail, and Keith will come home. Thank you, God bless you, and good night.